You're paying it now. You're paying it now at 4 to 5 times the rate it takes to do nothing, or it takes to put somebody in an apartment, excuse me. So it's far, far cheaper to put somebody in an apartment with services than it is to do nothing, leave them out there. They're consuming resources either way. The money's coming out of our pockets either way. So when we get into talking about this, we get into talking about what are the smarter avenues of what we're doing. Are we doing the smartest thing possible? I would say no. By and large, in most communities, we are not. We are doing the most lengthy, most unintelligent thing possible. We're lengthening people's homelessness in many cases. So,
I think we enable a lot instead of empower.
Yeah. Well, and I'll talk a little bit about that. So the other myth, when we touch on this, most people have a severe mental illness. Not comparatively. It's about 13 to 15% for the entire homeless population. Chronically homeless individuals have a much higher rate, 30 to 40% mental illness. Another myth, homeless people don't work. 2002 study showed, and this pretty much mimics what we see in our numbers as well in West Virginia, 45% of homeless individuals that were surveyed, I believe in New York City, had worked in the last 30 days. Most homeless people in shelters have jobs, or have some sort of income, or have some sort of combination of both. Some kind of mainstream benefit, some sort of income. A lot work. They just don't work a high enough paying job to get out of homelessness. What else? What about charity? I assume you guys do a certain amount of charity. Does charity solve homelessness?
No.
I think charity is important. I think charity has its place. I think charity can mean the difference of one more day living on the street, being alive, when somebody gives you something, and it can mean a certain amount of comfort for you, but it doesn't solve homelessness. So looking at things that we can do to end homelessness, solve homelessness. The other thing I get a lot is that you will never solve homelessness. Why is the title of your organization the West Virginia Coalition in Homelessness? We're always going to have it with us. There's always going to be homelessness. Yes and no. I think always people will become homeless. I think that they don't have to stay homeless, I think is the difference. We have some communities who are ending homelessness now as we speak. So if you look up something about Phoenix, Arizona. Phoenix, Arizona, for all intents and purposes, has ended chronic veteran homelessness. There aren't chronic veteran homeless individuals on the street in Phoenix. And if there are, they're not homeless for long. That's because they chose to focus. That's because they chose to do something called Housing First, that I'll get into a little bit, that we're starting to see more success with around the state. Clarksburg, right now, Clarksburg is ending homelessness. They have housed 16, maybe 18 in the past 2 months, chronically homeless persons in Clarksburg. People who otherwise would have died in the street. People who are already consuming that 60% of the resources that were available. They've housed them. Not in shelters, not in transitional housing, not in a congregate living space, but in their own apartments. With case management, with assistance, with help, but in their own apartments. In their own place where they can walk in and lock a door. With their own dishes and their own bathroom, their own everything. And they're staying in that housing. So what they're using is, if anyone saw 60 Minutes a few weeks ago, there was a program called 100,000 Homes that was featured. It was the Anderson Cooper 60 Minutes. We work with that program. That's the program that's working in Clarksburg right now. Housing First. Housing First means we put you into an apartment. We do not pass go. It doesn't always mean that you go to a shelter. And it means that we don't have hoops and expectations for your behavior, for your lifestyle, for how you are when you're on the street before we put you into housing. A lot of our programs and a lot of shelters and a lot of the arguments that I end up having out in my workaday world is the concept of housing readiness. For years, we've operated thinking that we had to, anybody who lived on the street, we had to get you ready for housing. We put hoops in front of you. Okay, you have to talk about your resume, you have to talk about your life skills, you have to talk about what you're going to learn, and we have to get you housing ready for housing. How many people in here ever felt like they were like housing ready? Like, I wasn't in college, I was not housing ready. I had an apartment. I was an idiot. I didn't know what I was doing. I was not a responsible adult. I wasn't housing ready. So we're now seeing that we're having way, way more success when we drop that entire notion of somebody's housing ready. When you put somebody into an apartment and you assign a case manager to them, or you have people that act as neighbors, and I'll talk about a neighbor program that's going on in Clarksburg that's really interesting, suddenly you see success. With the right supports, they can stay in that housing. They're not back out on the street, because that's the biggest part of this assessment that we try to achieve, is not only the housing of people who are on the street, but keeping them in the housing. Because guess what happens when they leave that housing? They don't stay in it. If we don't have the supports for them to stay in that housing, cycles out all over again. Same situation. Out onto the street, out into a shelter, picked up by the cops, back consuming resources again. So housing first is something that we push because it's something that's working. Coordinating our response. This seems like a simple thing. I think a lot of people think that a system exists out there to catch people experiencing poverty and people experiencing homelessness. There's some sort of system that makes overall sense, and that somebody else is doing it and somebody else is handling it. I'm telling you that there's not. It's us. We dictate the system in our communities. We dictate how things flow. We decide how things make sense. So, I'll give you an example of historically how it's worked. I'm a homeless guy, and I walk into Shelter A, Mission A, you name it, a place that takes individuals who are homeless. He says, okay, Zach, are you homeless? Yes, I am. Can you prove that you're homeless? Yes, I can. I just got evicted. Here's my stuff. Okay, well, we have an open bed, Zach. We'll take you in. We'll put you in that open bed. No other real question. Then your case management begins. Somebody starts working with you, and you're in a shelter for who knows. You'll be in shelter for 6 months. You'll be in shelter for 18 months. We've seen people in shelter for 3 to 6 years. That makes no sense. Shelters are called, we call them emergency shelters because they're for emergencies. They should be for emergencies. They're not a place to live. So back to the system question. For years, we've not asked the kind of question that is normal in other places, other aspects of our society and our life. So in this scenario I'm giving you now, let me give you a sort of a metaphoric comparison. So I go to the emergency room, and I've stubbed my toe. I walk in, do my paperwork, I sit down, stub my toe, cut my toe. So I'm waiting on care. Pastor Godwin comes in, and she's having a heart issue, heart palpitations. She's about to have a heart attack. Maybe has already had a heart attack. She's come in after me. Okay, I've been there first for my stubbed toe. In our system of care and housing for homelessness right now, we take the person with the stubbed toe first. So would it make any sense to you in this scenario of they take me with the stubbed toe first and not rush the person through that's having the heart attack? We don't ask the questions of what is somebody dealing with. So when we're talking about chronic homelessness, talking about people that have substance abuse, mental health, chronic health issues, myriads of chronic health issues. Being on the streets is very hard on your mind, very hard on your body. We all know that just the rest of us living in a house, normal life, decent food, taking our vitamins, we have all kinds of health stuff going on all the time. I got something wrong with me every month, something going on. Imagine being exposed outside, not having the proper nutrition, not having the proper follow-up care, not ever seeing a doctor, and being 62 years old, using alcohol, using drugs, having a mental illness. Your health deteriorates very quickly. So getting more towards a system of coordinating our response and how we view what we're doing as a business. Most communities I go into, unless they've had a real change of heart, everybody's kind of in their own silo, their own place, doing their own thing, not coordinating across that community. So that's another big issue. They have a neighbor program in Clarksburg, and we talk about Clarksburg a lot because they're having great success. Clarksburg stopped the siloed view of things. They stopped looking at things from the standpoint of what each agency or each program was doing individually and said, how can we as a community change things? And they used 100,000 homes to do that. When we're talking specifically about the faith community is a big part of what's going on, what's going right in Clarksburg. If you've ever heard of an organization called Bikers for Christ, they're very fundamental in what's going on in Clarksburg and now, very fundamental to its success. The local mission there is very fundamental to its success. So at any rate, they're putting people who are chronically homeless into housing. And Pastor Godwin and I were talking about this before this morning when I got here, but a lot of times make the assumption that when you get somebody into housing, they've been on the street, we go, okay, well, you should be fine now. You're in your own apartment, everything's fine, no big deal. Well, we've changed their whole life. We put them in an apartment, we take them off the street, we've changed their whole support system. Most of their friends were the people who were out on the street. That's what they got used to. So what they're doing in Clarksburg is they have what's called a neighbor program, where a lot of the local churches are coming together with Bikers for Christ and several others, and they're training groups of volunteers to be neighbors, to go into people's apartments that they're housing and be a friend, someone to talk to, how to wash your dishes, how to take the trash out, how to do the basic stuff that most of us take for granted, and give them an outlet and give them someone to be around and someone to talk to. So those are the kind of things, those are the kind of initiatives that are creative, and they really have teeth to them because it's all around housing. It's centered around housing. The focus is on housing, either getting people into housing or maintaining their housing. So, what I would encourage you all to do going forward, I think you're already off on a really, really good foot. I think it's very exciting that this is a topic that you're continually talking about. I would say don't stop doing anything you're doing in terms of even the charitable part of it, but I would ask you to think about how you interact with folks, how you view homelessness on the whole, from the standpoint of these are folks, these are people. Some of us are not lucky enough, but I guess just unfortunate enough to be able to attach faces and names to people that we really care about who have died on the street. I have 2 cousins who have died on the street, so it's a little easier to make that connection. But as you're working in the community, as you're talking to them, understand that in many cases, you could be for that person that day sort of the peddler of hope that they need. And I think that's what we're all doing here. I think that we're all, to some degree, peddlers of hope. I think there's some exciting things coming your way in your community from us and from the local service providers that are coming down the road. 100,000 homes that has worked so well in other communities is going to come here to Wood County. So when that happens, I would ask you to keep your eye open for that. And I see you guys as being a major part of that, quite frankly, as a real initiative to really bind everyone else together. Don't feel like just because we have Agency A, Agency B, shelters, places that have been doing this for a long time, it doesn't mean that you don't have a place to fit. I think you have a very prominent place to fit. You can help influence things for the positive. So I will hang out if anybody has any questions. I want to thank you guys so much for having me come today. There's a lot more information out there. Our website, just look up West Virginia Coalition to End Homelessness. We have a Facebook page. We have Twitter. If you're into Twitter, you can find us on Twitter as well. So, questions? Yes, sir.
Do you have a percentage that of those homeless that have no family at all?
No.
Versus.
No, but you bring up an important point. It's hard for us to nail down from the standpoint of who doesn't have, statistically, who doesn't have family, who doesn't have connections. However, a lot of times what you see, the difference between somebody being poor and ending up on the street, being homeless, is that very difference right there. Not that catchment, not that family connection or connection with friends or a support structure that we all know. My wife, for instance, had my stepson when she was very young. She was in Arkansas, came back to West Virginia. Much on the sort of similar arc that we see a lot of say single moms that end up on the street. But she had her parents to go to. She had her parents to rely on.